was almost cool. Here we are, Independence Hall. I'm actually on the Independence Hall Visitor Center. They have this little plaza up on the second floor where you can get the best view of Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell Pavilion over there. That's the President's house. This is Market Street. As you see, the city of Philadelphia is under construction because, in almost a year, America will be turning 250 years old. Fingers crossed. We're going to do a little scootski wootski. Join me. Shall you? He's going to sue me. Here we are. Walnut Street. I think this is 3rd and Walnut. Could be 4th. No, that's 4th. That's 5th. That's okay. So this is 4th. We're at 4th and Walnut, and this is the Todd House. And in the Todd House, back in 1793, just 2 years after moving into this corner row home, John Todd, along with 400 other Philadelphians, died of yellow fever. The following year, his widow Dolly married the influential but very shy Virginia Congressman James Madison, and he later became the 4th president of the United States. Don't be writing book reports, but I think this story is true. When John Todd died, his son also died of yellow fever. So Dolly Madison was in a deep state of mourning. So James Madison, when he was the influential Virginian, he had a house not too far from here. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to go from Dolly Todd's house to Dolly Madison's house, because I think she lived there for a second. And then guess what? They wind up living together in the White House because they get married. Dolly Madison, if you don't know, when the British invaded the White House, Dolly Madison was the hero who saved a portrait of George Washington. And this is a very historic section of the city of Philadelphia. This is Society Hill. The lamppost of Society Hill, designed by Ben Franklin. That's called the Franklin light. Ben Franklin didn't just do that. He also started this insurance company, the oldest fire insurance company, founded in America, 1752, by Ben Franklin and his friends, right here. And what's that insurance company with the hands? You're in good hands. Doesn't that look like their logo? I forget. Allstate. Right here, you see this. This is a boot scraper. Back in the day, you would have horses. They would be trotting. They would be dooting. If you saw my video in Intercourse, Pennsylvania, it's an issue. Horse doot. It's a problem. It's all over the place. So what you do is, if you step in mud or doot, you scrape your boot on the boot scraper. Yeah, look at the pavement. It's all bricks in this area. This was the first section in the United States to be gentrified. Back in like this 1940s. Look at the beautiful architecture, right? Back in like the 1940s, these houses were kind of old, so a lot of poor people were living in this area. And back in those days, we had a city controller, and his name was Edmund Bacon. And Edmund Bacon, his whole job was like to make sure the city didn't fall apart. And he said to the mayor at the time, I think the mayor could have been Dilworth. Nah, don't be writing book reports, I forget. But he said to the mayor, we're going to be losing. These poor people can't save these old historic homes, and they're going to start falling apart. We should go in and try to preserve some of these houses. And then that's when they started gentrification. And so the houses went from being one of the, this was one of the poorest areas to now, this row home right here could probably go for $2 million. Could be more, could be less. Oh, look, there's speaking of the, there's a little thing right here of Edmund Bacon. Yeah, Edmund Bacon. Look, there's the Franklin light. 1964, he was on the cover of Time magazine And doesn't he look like Kevin? Just a little bit. If you go through Society Hill, they have these little alleyways that you cut through, and you can go to these apartments back here, or you can get out and go to like 3rd Street or wherever it is. Oh man, look at these old houses. These are super old. This is called Bell's Court. 1813 these houses were built. A little private courtyard. Anyway, so these little walkways, which there's not many places like this in the city. This was Edmund Bacon's idea. Oh, is that St. Pete's Church? I love this graveyard. This is one of my favorite graveyards. This is St. Pete's Church. And there's a lot of famous people buried in St. Peter's Church, 1761. This is the Dallas Church. If you ever, you probably seen me do this before if you watch some of my history videos. Buried in this cemetery is the former mayor of Philadelphia. He was also the vice president under James K. Polk. And his name is George Mifflin Dallas. And George Mifflin Dallas is who the city of Dallas is named after. Right here. George Mifflin Dallas. He died in 1861, and the city of Dallas is named after him. And if you don't know, Philadelphia Eagles fans, we hate everybody, but we hate Dallas fans the most. And I just think it's kind of interesting that the guy who the city is named after is he's buried here in Philly. Where's he at? Right here, you got the grave of John Nixon, who was the sheriff of Philadelphia back in the 1776 times. And when the Declaration of Independence was read publicly for the first time, guess who read it? This man right here, John Nixon. This is Benjamin Chew. If you ever heard of the Battle of Germantown, that happened on his property. I think it's called Cliveden, which is on Germantown Ave. I should do a Germantown scoot soon. And if you look at Benjamin Chew's grave, you'll see this headstone with this steeple on top. And if you look, the steeple on top of that headstone is identical to the steeple on top of this church, because the person buried in this grave is the person who paid for that steeple to get installed. And this is one of the cooler cemeteries here's some more Chews, relatives of the founding father over there. There's not many cemeteries in the United States where you have Revolutionary War soldiers buried. I mean, there's a lot, but in Philadelphia, especially in this section of Old City, there's a whole bunch. And if you come to this cemetery or graveyard, they have a telephone tour. So you just call a phone number and they give you a free audio tour of the history of the cemetery. There's so many people buried here. You go back in this corner here. This is Charles Wilson Peale. And he was the portrait artist of the founding fathers. I will see a Charles Wilson Peale painting sometime on this scoot, and I will show you. I'll say, here, this is one of his paintings. That's how, I guarantee you I will see one. And then if you go over to the cemetery on this side, if you go over in this space, there isn't many headstones, and I believe that's a mass grave for people who died of yellow fever. You're in a graveyard in Philadelphia and you see a big plot of land with no headstones. Odds are it's a mass burial ground. I'm going to go to James Madison house. I can't let the ADHD win. I must show you where James Madison lived. Oh, here's another, I guess this guy is responsible for Dallas too. This is Alexander James Dallas, and he's the father of George Mifflin Dallas, and he is the dad of the guy who the city of Dallas is named after. Back during the Revolutionary War, St. Peter's Church had a wooden fence, and that wooden fence was removed by the British military because they were using that church as a hospital. So they ripped down the wood to that fence to heat the hospital, and when they rebuild, they built it with brick. This is the Old Pine Church, and they have a history tour too. They do here. It's really good. You could scan it. And I think you have to pay for this tour, but it goes to the church. So if you ever come to the area, download the tour. I did it, and it's really there's a lot of people buried in here. Historical building marker on it. The Third Presbyterian Church, Old Pine Street, founded 1768. Oh. God is good. Oh, the cemetery's closed. I can't go in here right now. If you go back there, there's a guy who was the leader of the Philadelphia Orchestra. There's also a gentleman buried behind this building, just a little bit off the path, and he's the man who rang the Liberty Bell during 1776, when we're doing all that stuff. The day they read the Declaration of Independence. He's the guy who rang the bell. Right here, James Madison, hon. I was gonna say this is James Madison's delivery box, but it's not. Right here, James Madison, 4th President of the United States. Lived here with Dolly Madison. Told you. I wonder how much stuff Dolly Madison took over from the old place. And look, that's a boot. Ooh, I wonder if James Madison, right? Yeah, I wonder if he wiped his boots. Right? Ooh, history. Dolly Madison. I got some horse shit on my boot. And right here, this is a person who owned the house after James Madison lived here. The Howes, Mr. and Mrs. Howe. And this is a giddy-up. That's what I call it. I don't want to get too technical. But you would stand on this, and it would kind of give you a boost so you could step on your horse. There you go. I didn't know Kevin Bacon's dad wasn't responsible for these walkways. And these are one of my favorite things about Society Hill. They're kind of like shortcuts. And to tell you the truth, tourists, they don't know that you can walk through these areas, so they're never crowded. And look, here we are, right back at Washington Square, which is a park, which is also a mass burial ground. A lot of dead people. You like walking around where dead people are buried underneath your feet and not knowing about it? Well, may I suggest Philadelphia. Here's a historic house that's getting fixed up. I don't know the history of this house like the 1700s, but I do know the last person to live in this house was Richard Dilworth, who was the former mayor of Philadelphia. Back in the 1970s, up until the 1970s, Philadelphia city employees would be given historic homes, and they would kind of keep up on the upkeep and, make sure the property would be maintained. And then there was a big article in local newspapers about how it shouldn't be, city officials shouldn't get free housing. So then all these historic homes here and in Wissahickon Park, they started falling apart because nobody was living in this whole section down here on Walnut Street is it's called Insurance Row. We have Jewelers Row, which is like a block or two that way, Insurance Row, and Fabric Row, that's 4th Street. You got Restaurant Row is 2nd Street. Right there is Independence Hall. That's where Ben Franklin and Nicolas Cage, that's where they hung out and they did that stuff for National Treasure. I love the doors to this building. This is the Penn Mutual Tower. Queen Elizabeth went through those doors back in 1976. If you go right behind Independence Hall, is right here. They have this building. It's on Insurance Row on Walnut Street. You got this cool facade, this modern building, 510 Walnut Street. It's a beautiful glass tower. But if you look across the street, it's all about perspective. If you looked at it from this way, they have the facade of the old insurance building that was here in the 1800s. A way of mixing old Philadelphia and new Philadelphia together. I told you I'm going to show you a Robert Morris painting, right? I can actually show you a building, not Robert Morris painting. Well, it's a painting of Robert Morris, but it's a Charles Willson Peale painting. And if you go back here, there is the Second Bank of the United States. The Second Bank of the United States is no longer a bank. It's now owned by the National Parks. Oh, it's windy. Yeah, the Second Bank of the United States is no longer a bank. It's a portrait gallery. That's a tough word, portrait gallery. It's a portrait gallery of the Founding Fathers. I have videos on my channel. Just type in Philly Captain, Second Bank of the United States. And I did a pretty detailed tour. It's never open. It's never open. It will be open in the summertime. And I'll tell you, the best thing about that building is no one's ever in there. This is Robert Morris. He was the financier of the American Revolution. He made most of his wealth dealing with trading of slaves. Robert Morris donated his house at 6th and Market to George Washington and John Adams to live in when they were president of the United States. And if you go right here, here is a portrait painted of Robert Morris, and that was done Charles Willson Peale. Come on, cuz! Love this city. All right, well, that's it. That's my little history scoop. I hope you enjoy it. Make sure you hit like and... Oh, I don't end the videos like that. I have a Cameo. Check out my Patreon. And check out my merch at Hog Island Press.